Hello, everyone. Hello. It's great to see you. My name is Max Hollein. I'm the director and CEO of the Met. And I want to welcome all the great women here in the audience and the few men who are also here. Thank you for joining this very special program. A program that's really dear to our heart and has become a fixture in the annual calendar of the Met, Women and the Critical Eye. It received an enthusiastic response from the very beginning of when it started. This is the 21st iteration, so it's been around for quite some time. And it basically is building now already the next generation of supporters, of people who love the program, of women who see that this is something where one can convene, can participate, be part of something that brings people together. So the love of collecting for the arts, for appreciating art, for appreciating creativity, and really also understanding how together this creates a powerful and interesting environment. At the Met, we of course recognize the power of women in the arts and the power of women in our environment. I can tell you that the Met staff, the majority are women. I can tell you that the leadership of the Met, I mean, you need to take me out of that, but otherwise, it's almost all women, and that's good. It's a steady ship moving forward. And we just had today a great celebration of our volunteers, and 73% of our volunteers are women. So it's basically really a museum powered by women, empowered by women, and supported by that. We also, of course, celebrate the great, great women of art and art history. And just until recently, we had this fantastic show on Helen Scherfbeck, one of the great painters of the late 19th and early 20th century, not known yet before the Met show in the US, but of course, the most important artist in Finland. And so it was a great introduction of this wonderful artist to an American audience. Currently, you also have a show on Lillian Bassman, who was a cutting-edge photographer and really kind of innovated fashion photography in that context. And I hope you're looking forward to a show that will be really important. It's our main fall exhibition, and I would say that means move over Raphael. Now comes Krasner Pollock, and that will be a show on Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock. And of course, you have a story here about two great artists, two great painters, and probably also two different trajectories in art history. And in a certain way, Lee Krasner probably suffering in regard to a certain form of reception under the fame of Jackson Pollock. And I think that this show not so much needs to overturn that, but it really will show Lee Krasner's work as something so outstanding and remarkable and also influential in its own right, in its own way, and in juxtaposition also with Jackson Pollock. So really a powerful, important show coming up. The Met also is committed, of course, to contemporary women artists, and tonight I think we are also celebrating that. So as we prepare for our new galleries for modern and contemporary art, the Tang Wing, which is scheduled to open in 2030, and which will significantly expand not only our space for contemporary art, but really also our collections and what we show, how we show it. Of course, women artists will play a very important role. And three really remarkable women artists are here with us tonight, all of them powerfully already represented in the Met's collection. And that will be Nicole Eisenman, Danielle Mckinney, and WalkingStick. This program will be moderated by Jane Panetta, the Met's Aaron Fleischman Curator in the Department of Modern Contemporary Art. And together they will talk about, probably a little bit about art, but what they really will talk about is motherhood and how that has impacted and shaped their career as artists. And this is also a program that is the first iteration chaired by Met Trustee Janice Lee, who, after the long-standing leadership of founding host committee member and of the Women in the Critical Eye and Trustee Emerita Lulu Wang, Janice has now taken over. She joined the Met's board 2 years ago, and immediately when we asked her would she want to chair Women and the Critical Eye, she said yes, and it's basically really is deeply meaningful for us to have her as the successor for Lulu and also as a great mentor of this program. Janice is an accomplished and acclaimed writer, an avid supporter of the arts, truly also a champion of modern and contemporary female artists in her own personal collecting, and she played really immediately also a pivotal role in shaping the theme of tonight and shaping, so to see, the next generation of programs that will come to Women in the Critical Eye. So I want to thank her for that, and you will hear from her in a moment. I want to also sincerely thank our friends from the SK Podium Museum who are here with us today. And for those of you who have not been to Jeju Island yet, you need to come to see the Podium Museum, which is a fantastic place. And Jeju Island in itself is a wonderful location in Korea. And it's wonderful to have that support, especially also because the Podium Museum is also supportive also of female artists in that context. So thank you for supporting us, and thank you for accompanying this program moving forward. And finally, I want to thank all of you, the Women and the Critical Eye Host Committee, for your incredible support and dedication to the Met, to our programs, and to creating such a vibrant community. And with that, I want to turn it now over to Janice. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Max, for that generous introduction. It's so wonderful to look out on this beautiful crowd of women and a few men and see the evolution of what Lulu Wang set into motion some 21 years ago. I'm so honored to have taken this over from you, Lulu. Thank you. Women in the Critical Eye has grown from several dozen women into the hundreds of you here tonight in the Rainey Rogers Auditorium. And I think it speaks to a real desire to see how women, whether they're artists, collectors, professionals, or aficionados, navigate the world of art. In Critical Eye events of years past, we have heard from collectors, children of artists, architects, museum founders, and even some men, all united by one common thread: how art is interpreted and engaged with by women. I'm so excited to hear from these extraordinary artists tonight and to have the privilege of listening to another, more personal side, one you don't always get to hear, about how their experience of motherhood has affected their work and their life. I want to add my thanks to our wonderful host committee. Thank you to all friends, past, present, and future, who joined, the dedicated Met staff who made this possible, the two great Kates and brilliant Brianna, Lulu, Max, and to SK Podium Museum, our new sponsor, for their generous support tonight. Please join me in welcoming Nicole Eisenman, Danielle Mckinney, Kay WalkingStick, and Jane Panetta to the stage.
Good evening, good evening. So glad to see everyone here. And a big thank you to Max and Janice for such a generous introduction. I'm very excited to be doing this talk. This feels like a different kind of talk than I get to usually do, so I feel very honored, and I feel especially honored to have these three incredible artists with us, Kay, Nicole, and Danielle. As Janice and Max alluded to, we're here to discuss what it means to be both a mother and an artist, and to simultaneously think about how these spheres are navigated and their intersecting realms. Together, we'll discuss how motherhood has shaped and inspired their artistic practices, perspectives, and creative voices. Just to give you a little road map of how we'll proceed, each artist will present on their work and how it's related to and has emerged alongside of their experience of motherhood. After these presentations, we'll have time for a discussion and can dive into these questions in more depth, so I'm really looking forward to it. To start us off, I wanted to set this talk up a little bit and to highlight why I think this is such an important conversation and timely conversation for us to be having right now, and in a public space in particular. And I'm really appreciative of Janice for putting this topic forward for tonight. It was such a good idea. I'm starting with a group of works here from the Met's collection that depict motherhood in myriad ways. This iconography and subject matter has been a key part of the full art history, and here I'm showing works that span some nearly 4,000 years. Although not all work here that was produced by women, representations of this foundational relationship has been a fundamental cornerstone to image making throughout art history, I would argue. More recently, though, over the past 100 years or so, this has been taken up by women artists in particular as a means to take ownership of their own dual existences, perhaps, and to acknowledge, however subtly, the challenge of living within these different realms, motherhood and being an artist. Contemporary artists have increasingly inserted in their own narratives into this story, what does it mean for me to be a mother and an artist? And how might this creep into my art explicitly, or more opaquely, or conceptually? Recent examples on the slide here by Njideka Akinyele Crosby and Carissa Rodriguez, for example, have made autobiographical work that considers questions of their own motherhood and familial lineage, and even the struggle to become a mother. And beyond this, artists have begun to question what are the intersecting conversations between the art world and the role of motherhood. This is a photograph of Felita Barlow, the artist in her studio in 1975 with her daughter. I like this image, I like this artist. That's not why I'm showing it. I'm showing it because it popped up in my Instagram feed recently, and I found myself feeling genuinely surprised by the image, almost taken aback. It felt unusual to me to see an artist's portrait be one with a child. For so long, I think this has been considered to be the wrong thing for someone to emphasize, especially a woman artist. We've conditioned somehow to not expect to see this. Fundamentally, this isn't what being a serious artist looks like. But amidst my own shortcomings, there's good news. And what we're building on here today, I'm happy to say. Over the past several years, there's been a notable shift towards including this narrative of artist and artist as mother, artist as parent. Here I've included a range of recent organizations, exhibition, memoirs, and critical writing that have allowed for and created much needed active space for this conversation. Motherhood and being an artist is in fact a thing to be celebrated, even critically explored, and maybe most importantly, something to be supported. These realities don't live in opposition to one another. Motherhood doesn't compromise creativity. Art making can just as easily live harmoniously with being a parent. In fact, it can buttress and engender creativity. This is nothing anyone needs to be afraid of. And in contrast to Betty Friedan's all too apt at the time 1960s description of the feminist struggle as, quote, the problem that has no name, we now seem able to name the circumstance and celebrate it, even if simultaneously it represents both a challenge at times and a benefit. Very happily, you're about to hear from these three outstanding artists. They're all also in the Met's collection. I'm showing the Met collection works here, and I just realized the other day that for about 3 months from the fall into the winter, all of your works were on view together in the Levine galleries. So this conversation already started, in a sense. Each artist will talk about what this experience of motherhood has meant to them and how it has, or at times hasn't, impacted being an artist, the work they've made, the lives they've subsequently led. Their experiences are, of course, all distinct, generationally so and otherwise, but what they all share in my mind is a willingness, a courage, to allow the personal to be an essential piece of their work. Be it imagery of a chosen family, paintings that probe personal, intimate spaces, or works that trouble known landscapes with their own indigenous identity, each of them has been willing to consistently put a piece of themselves into the work. And for me, that makes them an ideal group of artists to sensitively take on this question of motherhood and being an artist. So on that note, I'm gonna very happily turn this over to Kay and give you the clicker. Thank you.
No, I can do it. I think of myself as having a huge voice. So I did for years. Try to put yourself in 1959. Now, I know most of you weren't born yet, so it's really hard to think in those terms. but trying to think of 1959, and I had just graduated from college. I got married 2 weeks later and went off to Penn State, State College, PA, with my new husband because he was going to finish his degree. I had two things that were kind of central in the back of my head. And one was to become a better artist. I wanted to be the best artist I could, you know? And the other was to have a baby. My hormones were pumping like crazy. And, you know, I think this happens to a lot of women, that we really want a baby. And it certainly wasn't the smart time to have a baby. You're first married and no money and a husband who hasn't even gotten his degree yet. And so I tried not to think about it too much. But as a matter of fact, a year and a half later, I had a son. Lovely, beautiful boy. And I have this lovely, beautiful husband as well. And we moved to New Jersey. That's what you do, right? That's what you do. We moved to New Jersey. And I tried to paint. I bought some, I realized that I didn't really know how to paint. You know, I really didn't know what I was doing. And I had a painting degree, but that didn't mean much. And so I started painting on my own and had some books that were about color and composition and all that, and they were very useful. And the piece on the right is an abstraction that it was a color study that I was just trying to learn more about color. And the one on the left is the cathedral in Bernathen, Pennsylvania. You may know it, not far from here. 2.5-hour drive, actually. But these paintings are typical of what I was trying to do. I was just trying to paint better. This is a piece this is called For Those Who Fly, because as you can see, there's no way to get out except to fly. And it was done in the Alexander studio at McDowell in, what's the date? It was sometime later. I don't have the date in my head, I'm sorry. But I think that I had a daughter 2 years later in 1962. And so I had 2 babies at home. And by the time I did this painting, they were no longer babies. Because those first 5 years, and I think this is about 65, 66 maybe, what is it?
This is 69.
69, okay. I really felt that those first 5 years, I owed it to those babies to be home with them, taking care of them, seeing to them. I really felt then that if you bring a child into the world, you really have to be there for those kids, and from the beginning. So I really was an at-home mom for a long time, and I painted very little. But I did paint, I kept on, and I did a lot of drawing. But this is one of the first paintings that I really felt that was a really an okay painting. And I'd switched to acrylic. This is acrylic. I did this painting at about the same time, I think. What does it say?
Also 69.
Yeah, also 69. This, the women's movement was really starting up then, and I was reading a lot of books. There were a lot of books. And kind of integrating these ideas in my head because the 50s was different, you know, and that's when I really matured. So this painting is about accepting one's own sexuality, one's own femininity, one's own womanhood. And the flowers, of course, are springing from her vagina. So, you know, this is a flowering of the ideas of self-acceptance. And of course, they're peonies because they're my favorite flower. Everybody's, right? This is a painting of my daughter, Erica, my darling daughter, with a painting of hers behind her, and it's she painted I believe a cat in pajamas, if I'm not wrong, a dancing cat in pajamas, and the other painting, the one on the right, is a painting of me when I still had a neck, and in my cowboy hat, with a painting that I was doing at the time, a figure. You can see it's a reclining figure, and it's kind of a strange reclining figure because it's what it is the woman is looking down at herself. It's her view. And so I was still working in acrylics. My kids were involved in the paintings, I think, all of them from the beginning, from their birth, you know. So I was their mother who painted. Other mothers didn't do that, but I was the mother who painted. But I painted at home, by the way. My studio was at home. And this is Pieces of Sky, and it's about the pollution in New York. I was living in, as I said, Jersey, but the pollution in New York and New Jersey. And this was about the same time, maybe a little later, I'm not sure. And this painting, when I was first starting to paint, and I had babies, and I knew that I was going to be home. You know, I knew I was going to be home with the babies and painting at home. But I had to use that time when they were sleeping and whatever to paint. And so the paintings went through a lot of changes, and as I said, they were very influenced by the feminist movement. But this is called April Contemplating May. And when I did it, and the behind April is the painting Pieces of Sky. When I did it, I couldn't show it even. I mean, there was no interest in my work at all, none. And so I rolled them up. When I moved, I rolled up all the paintings. And they stayed rolled up for a very long time. And just a year or two ago, Whitney bought this painting. So for those of you who are painters, be patient. Thank you. Maybe I should bow and leave now. This is the last painting I'm going to show you, and it was done at about the same time. It's my daughter Erica's favorite painting. I don't know if my son David has a favorite painting, but what? Hello, honey. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you how old my children are. This is, of course, a self-portrait. And I think it represents so much of that period of our lives together, me and my kids. There's a silliness in this painting that I think was part of our daily life. Everybody should dance around with a rose in their mouth. So that there was a silliness that we enjoyed together. And also, I really think that every kid deserves a happy mother. And that's hard sometimes, you know? But I think we should try to be happy for our children. Smile at them, tell them we love them. They need that, that happiness that we can give them. So this is called, thank you. This is called Blessed Mother Blue, because my mother always called this color Blessed Mother Blue, so it seemed, you know, the right thing to do. And I showed this to a dealer, and the dealer said, I can't possibly sell anything with a name like that. I have no idea what. But I said, okay, I'll call it Carmen and Kay. So this is also known as Carmen and Kay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm up. A hard act to follow. That was amazing.
Seriously. Thank you, Kay.
It's really an honor to be up here with both of you, and thank you, Jane, for inviting me. All right, here we are. Nicole Eisenman, that's me. All right, diving in the deep end. I didn't really think I would ever be a mother. In fact, I made this painting shortly after college. It's dated the early 90s, but it may even be earlier than that. And I was thinking about why I didn't want to be a mother, and maybe about the sacrifices that I wasn't prepared to make. And so that's what this painting is about. I'm in the painting, I'm delivering this baby, and it's a birthday party. It's a first birthday party, and it's called Hanging Birth. Ooh, oops, I skipped over one. So that was in the early 90s, and I moved here to New York the day after I got my diploma at RISD in 1987. I came down to the Lower East Side, and this was amazing. This is the life I wanted, just to be living in these grungy places with my friends and having a great social life. And that's what I did for 10 years. And then around 2000, I met Victoria Robinson, and we got together, and Vic said to me when I met her, I want to have 6 rowdy Irish boys. And I was like, that sounds amazing. It was like the ambition of her idea of family really just blew my mind. So I was like, let's do it. So then when it came down to actually, we were together for about 6 years, just having fun before we actually started trying to have a baby. And then when we got down to it, when we started trying, I got a little apprehensive about the life I was giving up, or maybe thought I was going to be giving up. And I started making these beer garden paintings around that time, because I was really turning my focus and my attention towards my community of friends and inviting them into my studio to paint them and stuff like that. So these paintings happened around, I think 2006, 2007 is when I began them. I don't know, is there a date on them? 2018, okay, that's really later. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, my narrative just went out the window. This one's from 2008. Oh, this is the painting maybe where I was being more apprehensive about what I was about to give up. This is called Coping.
Seems like it.
And I thought of it as a political allegory at the time for what was going on in the world in 2008. But on reflection, it really is more a personal painting about my daughter was born that year and just the stress of it all. And there they are. There's Freddie and George. Those are my kids. My daughter, Jean George, we call her George, is now 19, and Freddie is now 17. And I made these paintings of them when they were little. And it's the only time I've really ever painted them, painted these portraits. And I I made them both as presents to Victoria. So they were never really they were never shown in a gallery or a museum, and they hang up in her bedroom now to this day. And I think this is probably the first time I've ever shown them in a slideshow. That's another way, for this slideshow, this quick introduction to who I am, I picked out paintings that involve my kids. This was a painting I made in 2016, thinking about what my little kids would be like when they were teenagers. They were toddlers when I made this painting. I was just imagining Freddie and George on the sofa, kind of keeping each other company. Actually, my little brother is sitting in the front row, Josh Eisenman, and this is really us when we were little, sitting on the sofa watching TV. This is a painting called Hope Street with Freddie and George, and it's a kind of, a more intimate painting of me reading to them at night. Such a nice moment of the day. I love that time. Is very lovely. Freddie made the hood ornament on this cart that was at the Whitney Biennial in 2018. He became aware that I was an artist and this was my job when he was, what year? So, yeah, about nine years old. Yeah, it's cute. I mean, my daughter George also posed for the figure that I then made into the sculpture that is the what I call the pole bearer in the same show at the Whitney. So George was an 11-year-old girl, and I 3D scanned her and blew it up, and they have such weird alien type bodies at that age where their legs are really long, their torsos are really short, and they're really weird looking. But when you scale it up, and I then thickened it up with clay and bronze cast it made a really interesting kind of figure, I think. And she was very proud at that time to be to be part of it, I think. And then Freddie, my son, 2 years ago, we started this one, which I showed at 52 Walker this year. And he modeled for all three of these figures that I then did a plaster technique on top of. He's maybe, it's hard to gauge what the hell he thinks about all of it, but it's, for me, very lovely having him embedded in this work. And I think I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks so much, Nicole.
Hi, I just also wanted to say thank you so much to Deanne, Kay, and Nicole. We've had kind of conversations, even talking backstage, was just a warm moment. So thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. So I'm going to dive in as well. I'm going to take a little introspective moment because my daughter kind of brought me inward. I, funny enough, have been painting all my life, but during COVID was when I really started with my ladies, I call them, and I found out I was pregnant at that time, and my art career really was still kind of in the incubating stages of, like, I was still working at Parsons in architecture, and still trying to figure everything out, but I had created a comfort, a little place upstairs, and I had the little baby inside of me. I was about 6 months pregnant, so I would be painting and talking to this little human inside of me and painting these ladies, and I was still I'm gonna say it out loud, an avid smoker, you know. It was like European. I was like, I can smoke and still drink alcohol, so I was still hanging on to every possible hope, like we've all said, of like, my life will not end. But I remember, and I chose these paintings because I really, you know, we talked about choosing work that really thought about our little ones, and I see her in all my work. I'm trying not to get emotional. But this painting in particular was like right around the time when Charlotte was born, and I went through that stage I think every mom or dad or parent goes through of like, what is this life now, and what am I giving up? So I felt like I was hiding. I was hiding a lot, taking these moments of deep exhales, smoking while I would take her, and she was in the little carrier, and be smoking a little Newport and being like, oh my God, she's gonna breathe the smoke, oh my God. So the ladies, I call them, became like hidden moments for me, to kind of show this vulnerability of becoming a mom. I chose this painting because as a mom, I think, you know, the world can tell you so much of who you are and what you should become, but I think my mom always told me, Joy, you'll know what to do. You'll know what to do. And I never thought I would know that, but intuitively when they hand you that baby, it's just you and that baby. And you really just know. And so I chose this painting because this was like right after I gave birth to Charlotte, around that time, I think, 2021. This is like right when I brought her home, and I'm standing there and I'm like, what the hell do I do? I was just smoking weed and drinking a Negroni, and like, now I gotta wake up at 3 and milk, and what, Mom, where are you? So this was about trusting that my body and my spirit told me what to do. I just knew. And I thought about this with that quiet moment. When we get quiet and the world stops, the body and the mind, and I say the spirit, will tell you. So I just intuitively knew. I chose this painting because as a mom, I went through something that the world could never prepare me for. My body changed, the way I saw myself. I would stand in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My breasts changed, my body changed. And I said, who am I? So these deep introspective moments, even though I paint these moments, I could see these ladies and I could feel them. I could feel the weight of like, this lady here is putting on her bra. You know, I was like, what is intimacy now? How does my husband see me? Who am I? You know, so that changed for me becoming a mom. But I knew that the more I was with her, the more that I became really who I am today because of being a mom. And that's the ultimate sacrifice, like Kay says, you know, a happy mom is a happy child. So I let go of this image of like, I gotta be this body of who I was before I had my baby. So I chose this painting as a dedication to, if you are a mom, your body changes, but that's the beauty of being who we are. Then rest. Sleep when the baby sleeps. Yeah, right, that did not happen. So rest became something that I painted, but something that I used to stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning watching Netflix and chill, and now I'm in bed at 9:30. Like, I can't go past that. So what rest became for me is like you become the algorithm with your child. You know, when she naps, I began to nap. She slowed me down. She brought me back into the moment. I watched her just slowly, you know, at 1 o'clock, on the dot, she was, no matter where she was, those eyes were going to close and she was going to go inward. So rest became a time of not slowing down, but a time to go inside of myself. And this was really about the world, because we were going through an intense time, but it was also too about my daughter, about once I kind of got through the newborn phase of like, okay, I think I got this. And I had a lot of tribe of women that were mothers that really helped me and were a shelter for me. So I say, if you're a mom or a parent, please build a community. You know, you need the tribe. But my daughter became the butterfly that was on the finger. She became, I didn't want to look past anything but her. And she's still that for me to this day. and will always be that. She's my greatest inspiration. So I chose this painting as the butterfly because it was a deep transformation, but I felt like it was a rite of passage I went through that every woman goes through. But then there were moments too where you doubt yourself. You know, I have to constantly let go of trying to be perfect, to be the best mom for her in this world that we live in, the technology, put her in front of, you know, I grew up with Sesame Street and magnolia trees. It's a different world, and I have anxieties about being a mom. It's very intense, but I think that's in my paintings too, like the constant cigarettes looking off into this ether of like when I close the door and she's asleep, and I go and I stand in the bathroom and I'm like, God damn, this is not easy, right? It's not. And I don't believe all the stories that, you know, you see. Who are you behind the closed doors? So that's the anxiety I chose to show in this painting about being a mom. And then lastly, where I'm at now is my daughter's 4.5. I'm learning to take care of myself. And, you know, I can give everything to her, but you can't, like Kay was saying, be a happy person if you don't take care of yourself. So I'm learning to do that, and that also means letting go of trying to be perfect, but also meaning taking care of myself, going to see good art at the Met, and being around good people, laughing again, rediscovering my new identity, right? It's a rite of passage. And then again, rest, just rest. I finally feel like after 5 years, I'm sleeping again, you know? I still co-sleep with my daughter. So I put this painting in here because I went against the normal of like sleep training. My daughter's still 5, and at night I pick her up after she's gone to sleep, and I hear her say, Mommy, and I put her next to me. And the days that maybe she's not with me or, you know, transitions, I miss her, and I will co-sleep with her until she says, Mommy, I'll always sleep with you. And I think about that time where she won't, and that makes me really sad. So I put that in there. I'm an avid co-sleeper, so. And I sleep with my cats, too, yeah. And then this painting's called, I think, Magic Mirror. It's just really about, and I think this goes beyond just being a mom, just a human being in the world we live in of perfection. Do we allow ourselves to change? Who are we? You know, and I really think as a mom that will test you. And other moms show up and they've lost 25 pounds right after a baby, and you're like, what the, you know? So I think that, like, I put that in because it's a constant, like, who am I? And being a mom will always make you question that, but also being a human being. And lastly, I put my best friend. I told her tonight I would be showing her, and she's like, how long are you going to talk about me, Mom? She made a painting of a butterfly to commemorate the painting I did, and she's my best friend, and she's in all of my work, and she's my #1 cheerleader. I'm making a show now, and she's the only one that's seen my paintings and told me to keep going.
Thank you guys so much. I loved hearing the kind of range of things you all touched on, and seeing these paintings and thinking about the way they're engaging with motherhood, with your kids, with parenting in so many instances in this very non-didactic way, which is really interesting, and kind of, I think is a good thing for us to all remember as we kind of approach artworks in general, think about this topic in general. To start, I wanted to kind of have each of you drill down a little bit more, and you've touched on this, what it meant at this moment when you had a child or had your second child, and what that impact was, what that change was. Were there ways it slowed your career? Did it end up being generative? And was it somehow different than what you had anticipated it might be at that moment? Yeah, anyone can jump in.
I'll just jump in because I do want to talk about the beer garden paintings that I was making. I think that slide is actually misdated, which is very likely because I gave you all the information. But I started making the beer gardens in 2007, 8, 9. Those were from those years.
It's probably a 2008 painting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think my feeling really was an apprehension about what was about to be lost. And I think just beginning the cycle of thinking about what I was going to get in terms of what I wasn't going to have was generative in and of itself. I mean, any major life upheaval, really, as an artist, is going to be generative. Whenever you change your circumstance, you have new thoughts, and new stuff arises. And I think that's kind of my beginning, not this one, but the beer garden, but that was like the beginning of me, like just even beginning to process it, you know.
And this painting, you're in this painting as well, aren't you?
And then that one, yeah, I am.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to hog too much, though.
Yeah. Other people about this, the kind of moment when you have a child and how things changed or didn't change, or did it feel generative? Did it slow things down? Was it different than what you had expected somehow?
You know, it's so many years ago, really so many years ago, that it's really hard for me to talk about it. But I can say that later on, not when they were little, but when I was actually trying to show my paintings and to dealers and things like that, if they came to my studio, I was very careful to take down the pictures of David and Erica. I took down anything that related to personal life, because I knew that they would focus on that, and my kids were awfully cute, you know, so of course they would focus on that. And I knew that they would put me in a box. They would, like, she actually is a mother before she's an artist, somehow. And that they would put me in that box and maybe still relate to my paintings somewhat, but I wasn't going to be shown. I wasn't going to be taken that seriously. And that lasted for years. It didn't pass. You know, everybody thinks that the women's movement has changed everything. Well, maybe it has. I haven't been in that position for a while now, but I kind of doubt it. I kind of doubt it. I think that there's still it's like, how could she possibly be serious? You know, how could it possibly be that she could do two things?
Yeah. And I remember you saying to me, Kay, that in this period you also thought of yourself as a part-time artist but a full-time parent. So even in kind of how you were thinking about it, you were kind of feeling this compulsion to dedicate very intensely. You talked about this to your parenting in this moment. Danielle, anything you want to add here?
I remember right after I had Charlotte, I wanted to be with her 24/7, but then I'm the type of person that I need an escape. So my paintings became my escape. And I was very fortunate that I had galleries that supported me as a mom, and a world around me that really supported me. So I think for me, and I had my studio at home at that time. I made a little small space. So I think for me, it was a way for me that I needed a break from being a mom. So my paintings became the escape. Yeah.
So I want to go back to maybe something that I was alluding to when you guys first finished, and this question of this issue of motherhood, of being a parent connected to your work. Did you think about wanting to have that be visible in the work? I mean, a lot of the works you showed, it's not so immediately, you don't register it, but you're talking about it. Was that a conscious decision to allow it in kind of conceptually, but not have it in kind of a one-to-one representational way. Or Nicole, there were cases where you were more comfortable kind of making paintings of your kids, although interestingly, you haven't shown those as much. So will you talk a little bit about how you thought about this as it crept into the work, what it meant to kind of have it there explicitly, less explicitly, let's say?
I don't think it, the paintings that I made after this, the work I showed you, that ended in '72, it was 10 years after my daughter's birth. I made a series of paintings after that were about, with aprons. They were my work apron, but of course I was a mother going after, I was going to graduate school at the time, and I was going back and forth, and between graduate school and home, and so my kids were very aware of my going to graduate school. They were young teenagers, and I did something in graduate school that I would not do now. My kids were alone after school till I got home from Pratt. So they were home alone about 2 hours. I would never leave kids alone 2 hours. No, never. It's a different world, It's like, I wouldn't do that. But anyway, they were great kids, and they were very supportive of my going to school. And I did a series of paintings called the Apron Series, and it was all about my dual life. I had this double life that I was leading, and I was very energetic at the time, so it didn't wear me out or anything. And the paintings were about all of that. And yet, if you look at the painting, it's just a painting of an apron, So I don't know how much my family life entered my paintings, except, of course, they were, because the paintings were about me. Mm-hmm. So they had to be. But they weren't, no one would have known. It was, I don't think. Mm-hmm. I really don't know.
Now we know.
Yeah, I feel like I could just say ditto to that. I didn't think about including my kids and making them subject matter or not. I think it kind of happened because they enter in, it's not them as subject matter, but it's the feeling that you have when you're raising them, and this, it comes in kind of sideways subconsciously into the painting. So I think coping, that painting coping is very much about that. And, I think occasionally I would think about and be like, I had these collectors who were really on me, and they were saying, you should really paint your kids. I mean, Marlene Dumas is painting her kids, and that probably turned me off to the idea. Although I was thinking about Picasso and him painting Paloma, and I really liked the way he did, approached his children with such playfulness and bringing out those moments with her, especially. And I did occasionally, but my thing, I think, was I was taking so many pictures of my kids all the time. I mean, I always had my phone out, and I have thousands of pictures of them when they were growing, from when they were babies, toddlers, and up to about the age of 10, and then they started putting the brakes on me. But it's interesting too, because I didn't find as beautiful and drawn to them like little pieces of candy as I was to them. I never really was drawn to paint them because their faces were just kind of also generic in the way little kids are generic. And I would just be painting a little kid with big eyes, it wouldn't look like anything. So I wasn't sure how to do, and when my kids came aware that I was a painter, they'd ask me to paint them, and it's just like, I will in time. It's like, I want your face to become what it is more. Yeah. And now I'm beginning to be interested in that with them.
I'm doing that.
Now that they're 18.
I think I was trained so much in grad school that to tell the story without telling it, as like Baldwin says, and my teachers would be on me about like, don't make it so obvious, and I was trained as a photographer about capturing the moment, and so, and I always wanted to be like, to say it without say it, but I also wanted to leave enough room, more than me, for you to enter, right? So I was like, if I give too much information, then it's going to become really about that. So that was that tricky part for me, where I was like, how do I put me in the work but not make it about me, but leave it all about someone else to have this moment with the work? So I wanted to be able to tell that story. So I did make one painting of a woman right after I had Charlotte. I made a painting of a woman holding a baby, and I said, that's not what I want to paint. I was like, this is too much of a narrative. But then that's the beautiful thing about mediums, that photo has this really strange ability to be able to be so factual. Like, it tells you everything. You read it, and you see it, and it's evidence. But with painting, I could add a baby to one of the ladies right now, and it becomes such a different narrative or metaphor, and that's the beauty of painting, I think. But I've always tried to add certain things in, and it doesn't happen. But the beautiful thing is, she's there. She's, like you were saying, like I look at that painting right now that's here at the Met, and she's there in the gaze of the lady, right? Like, I'm totally like, wish you would go to sleep now. I mean, I really want to smoke my cigarette, so they become different parts of that, but I really want to leave enough space for the audience.
Danielle, can I just highlight and ask you to talk for a second about one other thing? As much as your daughter's in these paintings, your relationship with your own mother is, I think, present in these paintings in a beautiful way. And I know you've talked a lot about the kind of types of comfortable, serene, peaceful spaces that she made, that those are kind of foundational for a lot of these works. We talk about her presence in these for just a second, too?
Absolutely. I was raised in Montgomery, Alabama, in a very poor neighborhood. I mean, it was pretty much the ghetto. But for my mom in her house with Anita Baker and Isley Brothers on, it was a place of a sanctuary. And for me, when the world was, especially in Montgomery, Alabama, my grandmother was like, she passed as white, and there was this whole moments of intensity. I would come back home and come into this house, and there would be this music and this sound. And my mom never liked bright lights, so she had always low lights. And so she had this beautiful way, and still to this day, to create this magic comfort in her home. So I think subconsciously, when you go to make work, the subconscious comes out. So I think I'm subconsciously painting that moment.
Kay, you talked about this a little bit, about this issue of the photographs, you taking down photographs of your kids. People came to the studio. And I know you've all kind of navigated this at different moments in time, but will you talk about this issue of maybe there having been a taboo for a long time, and maybe there still is, around being an artist and a parent, and maybe people's sort of thoughts of like, oh, well, now you're not taking this as seriously anymore, now this person will be distracted. Did you feel some sense of taboo, and how did you navigate that, and how has that played out in reality, let's say?
I felt it very strongly, very strongly. I had people say things that, unbelievable things to me when I would go into the gallery to show them, in those days, slides. But the nicest one, it was, oh, we have too many women. There's too many women in our gallery. Which I thought, like, what? I felt that, people asked me, well, did you have trouble as a Native American? Not really, not really. I don't think people even thought about it. There's so few, they're aware of so few Indians here that they don't really think I'm an Indian anyway. It wasn't that. It was that I was a woman, and a woman with kids. I think that was the great barrier. And of course, we're talking 50 years ago, but this was a reality then, and I think it was, I felt very strongly, really. I don't know how it is now, really. I'm, off in the woods. What do I know? But of what's going really on in New York. But I don't think those things end quickly or easily.
No, agreed.
Well, I did not feel the taboo, but I think it's probably thanks to you and women of your generation who did a lot of the heavy lifting to break down some of the barriers that women with children and babies face in the art world. I mean, thank you. You're welcome. No, I mean, I know it sounds kind of awful, dreadful to have to split your life in half this way. I never felt that, but I had role models like you, and I mentioned Marlene Dumas, and she was a big one for me, and she really is took on the subject of her, not really so much motherhood, but the subject of her baby, the body of her baby, and looking at the baby. And when she was in her studio, she had to put the baby on the floor. That's where the baby lived, on the floor of the studio while she worked. So eventually she put her canvas next to the baby and started making these full-size portraits of them, from life, looking at her baby. And they're really incredible paintings to me. And, and then I had a studio in Gowanus around the time my kids were, when we were getting pregnant and they were being born. And in my hallway in my building in Gowanus, Janine Antoni had a studio. And she was also a young mother, and she fenced off a corner of her studio and put a blanket down, and she would work in there with this little 2-year-old in the corner, as long as she can steal those moments when she could work. And it was so impressive. And and she's getting studio visits and having shows in New York, and there's the baby, and she was doing both at the same time. So I never felt like, and she was a little ahead of me in her career in some ways. So I never felt the burden of that, but also I wasn't Victoria did all the heavy lifting around the care of our children in a way. So as the exo-parent, as I like to call myself, maybe it was a little less burdensome.
I'm going to be honest, I felt it. I think, maybe it was because it was COVID and I was shut in the house and I was paranoid, but I think I felt it because I was, painting and making these paintings, and I remember I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, uh-oh, there goes my career. And I think it's because of the stigmatization that we've been known or have felt that to have a woman working, you don't have to be an artist, but have a baby, everything ends. Go to the house, make pancakes, and be quiet, right? And I was like, that's not going to happen for me. So, and I want to paint, and I want to be in the world. And I remember I kept it hush-hush, and then I made a phone call, and I called my friend, and she was like, you know what? She was my gallerist at that time, and she said, I'm pregnant too, join in. And I was like, okay, great, all right. And then I had a dear friend like that is now, I talk about her a lot, but she's been my force. She's sitting here in the room right now, and she was like, you paint, we can do this. Take your baby, go do a residency, live your life, paint, you got this. Come join the tribe of women that had babies, and you got this. And she's still that force in my life. So that's why I said it's important to have a tribe, because it breaks the belief that we are all conditioned to believe that we cannot do this, that it's a taboo, it's scary. So other women need other women. So I was thankful that I had other women that were, that had, like Kay was saying and Nicole has said, that have gone through that feeling and said, you know what, we're going to do this together. And I went to Spain. I traveled. My daughter has been to more places than I have been.
Building on that, and just quickly before we wrap up, what advice might you all, with all of your wisdom, offer to artists who are considering having a child amidst their career? And then also, what advice might you give to the rest of us as how best to support this?
Well, to be totally frank, if you're planning to have the child and you're looking forward to it, I would suggest that you have a partner that's very supportive, a partner that likes babies. Because I have to tell you, an awful lot of the child care in my house was done by my husband, Michael Eccles, who was very supportive of the idea of having children, of taking care of them. And I think that it's kind of a simple notion. You know, it really, a child needs two parents, if possible. Often not possible, but if possible. And I think that you have to be cheerful about and believe in yourself. Believe in yourself that you can actually do this, that this is absolutely possible, that you can have an exciting, challenging, wonderful career and children. But I think you have to believe in yourself to do that.
I would reiterate your advice to be that we have to be happy. We have to give our kids that gift, as parents, or at least appear that way. For real, though. But I think advice for those, because there are a lot of people I think here who have already had kids, or, and I think the way we support young mothers and young families and people thinking of have kids who aren't even artists is to support the policies that support young families. And it's like universal daycare. And if there's not a lactation station at your workplace, you don't wait to be a mother. You do it for the mother. Ask for that. And after school programs is a big one, so the young artists have some time to make their work, and that's about it.
Those are good. Thank you.
I think I could second that. I think the first thing I would say to anyone that's aspiring to have a family is drop the belief that you're going to have it all figured out. Right? I think that was part of why I wanted to, with the painting, say that you'll intuitively know. You just know, right? And I think the biggest thing is do not listen to everyone, right? I made the mistake of trying to be like, I'm going to sleep train my child. And the moment she screamed, I was like, this is not what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I'm going to listen to my spirit, right? So I think that to try to say, I'm gonna get a book and read this and that's gonna be it, the moment that baby looks at you, everything's gonna drop. So get off the gram and talk to some good people and then just live by experience. And then I also wanna advocate to what Nicole just shared. Education is so important, especially now for our young generation, for our children. I think being able to support, institutions, daycares, schools that really support, even the arts, like photography, like analog photography has faded out. I was like, where is that gone? Just to have children be able to be a part of that. My daughter's at a really great school right now where she's in a forest program where she's outside. It's amazing, and I think to have that is super important. And I also want to say, give other women and mothers voices, right? More voices and more opportunities like this where we get to hear real stories as opposed to like, I have a nanny and I travel all over the world and I lost 20 pounds. That's not true. So I think more opportunities where we hear true stories, that becomes tribe and that becomes our future.
That's a really, thank you. That feels like a really nice note to end on and a nice note for me to thank all of you for sharing so generously and so thoughtfully and for being so thoughtful about this program and the images you pulled together. So Kay, Nicole, Danielle, thank you all so much for doing this. And as I said, doing it in a public forum with 900 people. Thank you all so much for being here, and I would like you all to invite you all into the Temple of Dendor for a reception. Thanks so much.